Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we will continue with the news app. In previous video, we have set up adapter and repository. So if you have not yet watched it, I'll highly recommend you to watch that first and then watch this video. Now, this video is one of the most important video because we will be covering ViewModel and ViewModel Factory part. And also, this is our second last video of the news app series. Okay? So now, let's create it. Open Android Studio. Now, ViewModel is a part of MVVM, that is Model, View and ViewModel. So out of which we have already created model, then we are about to create ViewModel, and then View we will be creating in next video. Got it? I have already explained MVVM in detail in one of my previous video which you can watch by clicking on the I button. But still, let me quickly refresh your memory. See, View manages all the UI related activities such as design part or handling UI components in fragments or in activity. Then Model manages all the data related activities such as to set up database maybe from local data source such as room database or remote data source such as Retrofit. And then View Model manages all the UI related data activities. Basically, it acts as a mediator between View and Model for communication. Not just that, but it also manages all the logical part. And that's it. Now come back to Android Studio. Here in UI package only, we will create a ViewModel class. If you want, you can create a new package for it, okay? So right click on UI package and create a new class. Name it as NewsViewModel. And done. Here we have to create literally 10 functions. I know it's quite a lot, but this is where the real logic begins. Don't worry, it's super duper easy to understand if you know little bit about ViewModel. Okay? So now let's create it step by step. First step is to declare all the required variables. I'll write variable as headlines whose data type is mutable live data. That holds a resource class which we created before and news response for displaying headlines. Then I'll create another variable as headlines page to track the current page number for the headline pagination. And then another variable as headlines response to store the last received response for headlines. Next, I'll write search news variable as mutable live data. Again, same resource of type news response for displaying search results. Then, search news page variable to track the current page number for search result pagination. Then, search news response variable to store the last received response for search results. Then new search query variable to store the new search query. And then old search query variable to store the previous search query. And that's it. Next, we will add parameters as application and news repository. And extend it as Android ViewModel. Now we will create our first function as handle headlines response. So let me write the code first. and done. See, first it checks if the network request was successful. If successful, then increment the headlines page. If headlines response is null, then assign it the value of result response. Otherwise, merge the new articles with the existing articles in headlines response. Then return a resource success containing the updated headline response. But if the network request was not successful, then return a resource error with the error message from the response. Next, we will create another function as handle search news response in a similar manner. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, again it checks if the network request was successful. If successful, then check if search news response is null or if the search query has changed. If true, then reset the page count to 1. Then update the search query and assign the result to search news response. Else, increment the page count and merge the new articles with the existing one in search news response. Then return a resource success containing the updated search news response. And lastly, if the network request was not successful, then return a resource error with error message from the response. Simple. Next, we will create another function as add to favorite. So let me write it. And done. This function takes an article as a parameter, representing the article to be added to favorites. Then ViewModel scope.launch is a coroutine builder used within a ViewModel to launch a coroutines. That is automatically cancelled when the ViewModel is cleared or destroyed. Basically, it helps to manage the coroutine lifecycle. Then lastly, I have called a function upsert on news repository that will update or insert an article. Next, I have created another function as getFavoriteNews. There is no parameter in it. All we have to do is to call getFavoriteNews method from news repository. And that's it. Then I'll create another function as deleteArticle, very similar to addFavorite function. But here we will call deleteArticle method from news repository. And done. Next, I'll create another function as internet connection that will check if our device has active internet or not. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, connectivity services retrieves the system service for connectivity and cast it to a connectivity manager. Then get network capability gets the network capabilities of the currently active network. Then I have wrote question mark dot, that is save call operator, and run extension function to execute the specific block only if the expression on the left is non-null. And if get network capabilities is null, then the entire expression evaluates to false. So when expression checks the network capabilities and returns true if any of the specified transport types such as Wi-Fi, cellular or Ethernet is available. But if none of the specified transport types are available, then it returns false. And that's it. Next, we will create another function as headlines internet, which will check internet connection specifically for headlines page. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, we have a suspend function, headlines internet, that fetches headlines based on country code. Then resource loading post a loading state to the headlines live data indicating that a network request is in progress. And then it checks if there is an internet connection using the internet connection function which we created before. If there is an internet connection, then response will store the headlines fetched from the repository and post the result to headlines live data after processing the response. But if there is no internet connection, then post an error state to the headlines live data. Then catch keyword catches any exception that might occur during the network request. And when expression handles a specific type of exception like IO exception, indicating unable to connect, or for any other type of exception, it posts an error indicating no signal. Next, we will create another function as search news internet that will handle internet connection specifically for search news. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, search news internet function is similar to headlines internet function. So this line updates a new search query variable with the provided search query. Then resource loading posts a loading state to the search news live data, indicating that a network request for search news is in progress. Then it checks if there is an internet connection using internet connection. So if there is an internet connection, then it fetches search news from the repository based on search query and posts the result to the search news live data after processing the response. But if there is no internet connection, then it posts an error state to search news live data as no internet connection. Then catch block is same as previous function. And next function is get headlines. Whose parameter is country code. Then launch the ViewModel scope, and inside it, call the headlines internet method which we created before and pass the argument as country code. Same way, create another function as search news, whose parameter is search query. And inside it, call search news internet and pass the argument as search query. And done. Then last thing is to call get headlines method which we created just now inside init block. And pass the argument as US as the country code. And that's it. Our ViewModel class is ready. Next is to create ViewModelProviderFactory. So right click on UI package and create a new class as NewsViewModelProviderFactory. And done. So here I'll pass the parameters as application, news repository, then extend it as ViewModelProvider.Factory. Now, what is ViewModelProviderFactory? Basically, ViewModel Factory is a class that instantiates and return ViewModel. Simple. And then inside it, let me write the code first. And done. So this function is required to create an instance of the ViewModel class. Basically, it overrides the create method from the ViewModelProviderFactory interface. Then inside it, it returns a new instance of the NewsViewModel by passing the application and news repository instances to its constructor. This ast is used to ensure that the return instance matches with the generic type T which we called before. And that's it. Our NewsViewModelProviderFactory is also ready. Next, go to NewsActivity. Here we will set up ViewModelProviderFactory as well as nav controller. So first let me declare NewsViewModel and done. Then let me quickly set up binding. And done. Now first is to set up ViewModel. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, we are creating an instance of news repository by providing it with an article database instance. Means news repository class requires an article database as a dependency. Then we are creating another instance of custom NewsViewModelProviderFactory by passing the application and previously created news repository. Then lastly, we are using the ViewModel provider to create an instance of NewsViewModel. Then this parameter indicates the NewsActivty itself. And then ViewModelProviderFactory is used to create the instance. And that's where we specify the class of ViewModel we want. That is our NewsViewModel. And that's it. Basically, this setup ensures that NewsViewModel is created with the appropriate dependencies such as news repository and the article database. And also the use of ViewModelProviderFactory allows you to provide the custom logic for creating a ViewModel instances, which can be beneficial at the time of testing. Now, next is to set up nav controller on our bottom navigation view which we created before. So let me write the code. And done. Now see, we are finding the nav host fragment using its ID, news nav host fragment, from the support fragment manager. And as nav host fragment cast is used to obtain a reference to the nav host fragment instance, then we are retrieving the nav controller associated with the nav host fragment. Basically, the nav controller is responsible for handling navigation within the fragment. And then lastly, we are setting up the nav controller using setup with nav controller on bottom navigation. So basically, it will be aware of all the navigation action defined in a nav graph. It's like when you select an item in the bottom navigation, then it triggers the corresponding navigation action in our app. And that's it. Our news activity is also ready. Now in next video, we will set up our fragments. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, that is it for the video. If you are new to this channel, then please consider subscribing to my channel and I'll see you in the next video.